Hello everybody, so welcome back, and I thought today we make it a little bit more of a technical video again. So this is going to be about change management, specifically change managers versus BAU managers, because there's sometimes a little bit of a tension there. Now, we talked about machines before, organizational structures that are like machines, which a lot of the old structures still are, and we also talked about that if there's a change, sometimes it happens that the BAU manager is being replaced because he cannot be retrained and he doesn't fit into the new structure. But sometimes it actually has nothing to do with a BAU manager not being able to be retrained or with him not having the right skills. It's simply he's only replaced for a certain period of time in order to bring a change manager in. And why? Because a change manager has a completely different outlook and completely different skills than a BAU manager. See, BAU manager are basically employed to keep everything the same. And they may tweak things a little bit. They may adjust things a little bit if they are not working. But basically the structure is there, has been tried out maybe for years even, and they are supposed to make sure that everything works and everybody's happy with it. And that also everything works together with other departments. Now the change manager is doing something completely different. The change manager is changing it all, right? So it's a completely different outlook and also needs different skills because certain things have been put in place and do not have to be thought about anymore in a BAU environment. While in a change environment, if you're changing things, you suddenly have to think about why things were put in place, how they fit together with other departments. You're going to have to coordinate that as well, on top of what you would usually do in the BAU management environment. On the other hand, you do not have to do certain things that a BAU manager needs to be very aware of and needs to make sure is actually in place. So you can kind of compare it a little bit with leading an army through a country. So say if you're leading an army that is a known army through a country that is a known country that has been scouted before, that has been traveled before, everybody knows where the roads are, everybody knows where the supply lines are, everybody knows who the suppliers are, that's a BAU environment, right? So you have a BAU manager leading the army through, and the BAU manager needs to know the lay of the land, needs to have a plan on how to get from A to B, needs to know exactly where the stops are going to be, who they're going to get their supplies from, when they're going to get their supplies, and so on and so forth. So it is a huge undertaking, but it is predictable, right? Because people have done it before. If there is a problem, there is a fallback procedure. And if there is another problem, then there's usually a second fallback procedure. And there's always somebody who has already done this before. Now, change management is more like leading an army that you don't know through an environment that you don't know. So you may plan all kinds of things, but then all of a sudden you're coming to this river, right? And you cannot cross the river. So you look at the BAU manual, which says, okay, you cannot lead the army through the river because they would drown. And you have to take the BAU army with you because they are in the change with you. It's not just your change management team, right? So you're sending people to the right and to the left, and you look for bridges. And you cannot find any bridges because the bridges have been destroyed. And turns out that this little river is actually a V or a U. So you cannot go in either direction. And behind you, it turns out there's the enemy army because they've been watching you all this time. So you're in a little bit of a pickle, right? So what does the BAU manual say? Well, nothing about the situation because you haven't been in it before. So this is where the change manager comes in. And the change manager will do things that the BAU manual would never allow because they are way too dangerous, right? And they require skills that people who are in the BAU environment would never use. So you may use a rope and shoot it over to the other side, over a tree, and then somebody's climbing over. And if you would let somebody from a BAU environment do this, they would not know which tree to pick. They would not know which branch to pick. They would maybe not even be able to get the arrow over to the other side. And even if they would climb over, maybe fall into the river and drown. And you would have a lot of people drown in the process. But if a change manager comes in, they will usually have people who are used to this kind of thing, who have done this kind of thing before, who know exactly where to shoot the arrow, and who, if they fall on the way over, will be able to swim to the other side. And then they will build a makeshift bridge. Now, is the change manager much better than the BAU manager? No, not necessarily. It's a different kind of skill set. The bridge that the BAU, that this change manager is going to build is going to be shaky. It's not going to be something that lasts forever. It's going to be something that is used for that change to bring the army on the other side. And we're talking about a very rapid change at the moment, you know, where you cannot follow normal procedure, but where you actually have to improvise. But they will make it safe enough for the army to get to the other side. So then the BAU manager can take over and make it safe for everyone who is following, right? So it is a completely different skill set. You would not want the change manager also to take over the BAU manager's job, because for starters, the change manager would probably not be a very happy man, because he would need the variety, and doing the same thing over and over again is probably not his cup of tea. But on the other hand, also, he may not have the skills that the BAU manager has. The BAU manager has a lot of skills of caring for more junior people, for example, of putting procedures in place that even people who don't understand why the procedures are in place and why certain things are done a certain way will still be able to follow them. A change manager will maybe not have the patience to do this, but also may not actually have the ability to think himself into how junior people think. He may not have the caring abilities, for example, as well. So there may be things that the BAU manager has that the change manager simply doesn't have. It's simply a different kind of mindset. It's a different kind of skill. So nobody is better than the other. It's simply a different job. And that is sometimes worth taking and keeping in mind. I mean, I've had changes before where this was the case. It was impossible to follow normal procedure. The normal procedures were beautiful. The procedures manual was one of the best procedures manuals I've ever seen in my life, and they made it so easy for the negotiators to understand why they were negotiating certain things. It was incredibly thorough. It was taking into account everything that you could possibly take into account in a manual like this. But it also took a long time to update, because a lot of people had to approve it and so on and so forth. And it was just impossible to use for the change that had to be done in such a rapid manner that it would have been totally unworkable. And the metaphor there is, you know, if you have to triage in the military, for example, right? If you are on a field and 3 people get shot, what do? I mean, are you going to look at the procedures manual and suture, you know, the leg wound really, really beautiful, that there's not going to be a scar, but then the guy dies from the chest wound and the other 2 soldiers are long dead? Or are you just going to stitch him up real quick and, you know, just stitch up the head wound, you know, leave the leg alone, which may have to be taken off, but rescue the other 2 soldiers and make sure that they're okay, and then somebody else can take over and make sure that everything is being done later. So sometimes changes are like that. Hopefully they will not be for you. Hopefully you will have enough time to orderly plan your change and make sure that everything is going according to plan. And even though there's going to be some insecurity, some uncertainty, there will always be things coming up that you may not have anticipated. You will hopefully have been able to anticipate most of it, but sometimes changes aren't like that. And then you need a change manager who understands the procedures, who understands how everything fits together, who understands which rules you can break and which rules you can absolutely not break, and why. And that is the difference between change management and BAU management. And a lot of times BAU managers also have the knowledge, but they don't really, because they've been trained so much to follow procedure, have a real resistance within themselves to break the rules, which is good in a normal environment because they're not supposed to be breaking the rules, right? But sometimes you simply have to do that in a change. And you have to know when to do it. And you cannot have that inner resistance, because sometimes change decisions have to be made very, very quickly. So this was it for change today, which will come into your life probably during these changes that are coming. And if you see it like a wave, like we talked about before in, you know, the types of change, it can actually be a very, very exciting time. You know, if you go over that bridge and you build that bridge and you shoot that arrow over that tree and then climb over, it can be a really cool and really exciting time. It is, you know, uncertain, but that is also sometimes the spice of life. You know, so approach change with an open mind as something that brings a little bit of variety in your life, And if at the end of it, you have a legacy and you have something to look forward to give to your children, to your grandchildren, I mean, how incredible would that be? So please do join us, if you haven't joined us yet, on the G10 Mastermind. It's bit.ly/G10 Mastermind. And I look forward to seeing you there. And even if I don't see you there, please do tune in to the next video. We are going to have a few more before the Mastermind starts on the 26th of October. And I look forward to seeing you again.